वेलकम एवरीवन टू द डेली न्यूज एनएससी ऑफ 30th ऑफ अक्टूबर 2023। तो चलिए आज की इम्पोर्टेंट आर्टिकल जो है हिंदू न्यूज़पेपर से वन बाय वन देख लेते हैं। पहला जो है टाइम एंड चेंज, देन एन अनफोल्डेड इकोनॉमिक ट्रेजेडी, द इंडियन रेलवेज रेवेन्यू प्रॉब्लम, व्हाट हैज कॉज्ड द रिसेंट थॉज इन यूएसए वेनेजुएला टाइज, then PM discusses security situation in West Asia with Egypt president. Then Canada India rift is painful for common friend Australia. Government preparing to release Vision India 2047 document. Then developed countries to overshoot carbon emission goals, says study. United Nations Chief Gutteres meet Nepal PM Prachanda. Then the gravitational constant. पहला जो है टाइम एंड चेंज, a parliamentary committee appears to be quite close to finalizing its report on three bills seeking to replace the existing criminal laws. The Parliament Standing Committee on Home Affairs has postponed the adoption of the draft report following demands from opposition members that they be given more time to study it. The report is said to have at least three dissenting notes, mainly pertaining to the text of the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, which will replace the Indian Penal Code, and the Bharatiya Nagarika Suraksha Samhita, which will come in the place of Code of Criminal Procedure. There appears to be unanimity on the third bill, the Bharatiya Sakshya Bill, the one in lieu of the Indian Evidence Act, having begun in its deliberation only on August 24 and having held only 12 things. There are 12 situations. There may be questions about the adequacy of the scrutiny. The whole point of the introducing these new criminal codes was to bring about a major overhaul of a body of law deemed to be too colonial in orientation. Any meaningful study of these bills ought to have involved wide consultation among stakeholders across the country. Ideally, the panel should hold sittings across the country and listen to lawyers and activists on the details of the various sections, besides members of the subordinate judiciary who actually work the law procedure laid down in the codes. The demand for the more time to examine the report has emerged because the draft report was said to have been circulated in English only days before it was scheduled to be adopted, and that the Hindi version was made available only on the eve of the sitting. The panel's next meeting is scheduled for November 6. It would be unwise to treat the current deferment as nothing more than a brief interlude to give more time to panel members to study the draft report. Rather, it should be seen as an opportunity to extend the time given the committee by a few more months. The government seems to be keen on getting the bills introduced in parliament and passed during the winter session. There is no reason for such haste. It might be argued that considerable sections of the new laws are mere reproduction of the old codes, and that one study by the standing committee may be enough before they are introduced in the legislature. However, there are areas that may require deeper scrutiny, for instance, the scope for misuse, if any, in the new definitions, the desirability of the introducing new offences such as hate speech, and whether there is further scope for procedural reforms in the criminal justice system. And next, a uniform, sorry, an unfolding economic tragedy. A reflexive share of India as the fastest growing major economy range out when the National Statistics Office announced in late August that GDP had increased in the April-June quarter at an annual rate of 7.8%. The most euphoric cheerleaders predicted growth to accelerate to 8%. Even conservative forecasters routinely project GDP growth between 6 to 7%. The GDP-centric framing of alleged Indian economic success is wrong-headed. GDP is a flawed metric of national economic welfare. It hides inequalities and deflects attention from the acute job scarcity, poor education and health, unavailable, unlivable cities, a broken judicial system, and environmental damage. Fabrice celebration of India's large unequal distributed GDP hide the struggles of large numbers of people. Large GDP is not purchasing power for India. Fastest growing growing GDP should be a trivial achievement, just as a 10-year-old child gains height more rapidly than a 20-year-old adult. India, as a poorest of the major economies, should grow fastest. Embarrassingly, it has failed to consistently do so. In fact, contrary to the hype, GDP growth has slowed sharply over the past 2 decades. The problem has been weak mass demand. Pre-COVID and post-COVID, Indian GDP grew at an annual 9% rate in the mid-2000s as historically high world trade growth lifted all economies. A financial sector, real estate, construction bubble added forth to that of growth. This was unsustainable. Growth slowed to 6% after the global financial crisis 2007-18. 7 and 8. As world trade decelerates quickly by 2012 and 13, GDP growth has fallen to about 4.5%, but growth for that year and the next three jumped could say of a mysterious data revision in January 2015 juggled statistics, however, could help only so much. The slowdown resumed after the demonetization and botched GST rollout, and once the finance real estate bubble collapsed following the IL&FS bankruptcy in August 2018, GDP growth came down to 3.9% in the year before the pandemic. In fact, the pre-COVID growth was more dire than the publicized estimates implies. Indian statistical authorities present income from production is their measure of the GDP. In principle, expenditure on Indian products by national resident and foreigners should equal income because producers earn income only when financed by their wage, but expenditure grew at a mere 1.9% in the pre-COVID year. When income and expenditure growth differ significantly, an average of two more fairly represents the state of the economy rather than any one measure. By that averaging method, GDP grew by 2.9% in the pandemic year. The slowdown from the healthy 9% GDP growth in the mid 2000s to 3% to 4% before the pandemic reflected severe weaknesses in demand. The weakness manifested in the glaring drop in private corporate fixed investment from a peak of 17% of the GDP in 2007-18, 7 and 8 to 11% in 2019-20. Private corporations cut back investment, recognizing that domestic consumer fearful of job and earning perspectives had constrained purchasing power, and foreigners had only a limited appetite for Indian goods. In the post-COVID-19 years, the economy has bounced around. It fell sharply, recovered modestly, slowed severely, and experienced a dead cat bounce from late 2022. The only way to access this bouncy post-COVID capacity is by determining the average growth rate over the entire period. Even that is not straightforward if we consider the latest 4 quarters over the 4 quarters before the COVID. The annual growth rate of the income and expenditure average is 4.2%. If we compare only the latest quarter over the quarter before COVID, the annual growth is just above 2%. The telltale Sign of the post-COVID demand weakness is further drop in private corporate investment to 10% of GDP in 2021-2022. The analysts believe that it has remained anemic in 2022 and 23. Investors recognize that while rich Indians helped by an overhauled rupee are buying luxury goods, the majority can barely buy necessities. In response to shrinking mass affordability, producers continue offering ultra-low price staples such as noodles, toothpaste, soaps, soft drinks, and biscuits, but sell them in packages of ever smaller quantities. In December 2022, the government instituted a year-long free grain program for nearly three-fifths of the population. Analysts expect the program to persist through the 2024 general election. Meanwhile, to maintain consumption, households have slashed their savings rate to 5.1% of GDP from 11.9% in 2019-20. Those eligible for credit cards are racking up worrying levels of debt, and with an overhauled rupee and world trade barely crawling ahead, Indian exports have been falling. Need to bolster the demand. In the growth of a fake high growth story, government policy has tried to rev up supply rather than bolster demand through good jobs, more human capital investment, and functional cities. Unsurprisingly, the September 2019 corporate tax cut stops like PLI scheme and shiny flyover and highways have failed to revive corporate investment. Increased fiscal reliance on indirect taxes, which erode purchasing power, has aggravated demand. A sober analysis of GDP growth just before and after COVID points to a medium-term annual GDP growth forecast of 3% to 4%. Unfortunately, a domestic elite and international media narrative of high growth will continue, as will policies in opposition to India's need, and when narrative and reality clash repeatedly, tragedy follows. The next is the Indian Railways revenue problem. The Indian Railways has been on a spending spree with respect to capital expenditure, particularly after the government merged its rail budget with the main budget. However, its operating ratio, which is the ratio of ordinary working expense to the gross traffic receipt, has slowed down, slown no improvement, has shown no improvement. A lower ratio implies better profitability and a surplus for capital investment. The trap of rising debt, since the IR continues to have a total lack of surplus. It has been augmenting the funds raised through the gross budgetary support and extra budgetary resources. The merging of budgets help this cause, as a GBS from the central government could be increased without much scrutiny. However, with respect to EBS, there is a price to pay. The IRS spending on repayment of principal and interest is pegged at 2,229 crore rupees and 23,782 crore rupees respectively, which together make it 17% of the revenue receipt, a sharp rise from less than 10% till 2015-16. It appears that this debt liability was noticed as capex relied almost entirely on GBS in this year's budget. Despite this, the unprecedented rise in capex appeared to be predicted on the premise that the IR's operating and financial performance should not be viewed in isolation, but along with its role as an engine for growth of the country's economy. Investment in railways boosts manufacturing and services, tax revenues for the government, and allows for more job opportunities. However, a key organization like the IR cannot be allowed to go the Air India way. The investment made should be productive for IRs. Identifying the problem The air's freight segment is profitable, whereas the passengers segment makes huge losses. The Comptroller and Auditor General of India report represented in Parliament on August 8, 2023 states that there was a loss of 68,269 crore in all classes of passengers serving during 2021-2022, with all the profit from the freight traffic nullified in cross-subsidizing passenger services. This is nothing new for the IR, but the situation has become grimmer, and since any significant increase in passenger fare is unlikely, the IR has no option but to boost its freight volumes and in turn its revenue. The annual growth in freight volume and revenue of the IR in the period April-July 2023 and stand at 1% and 3% respectively, while the economic growth grows at 7%. This is the decimal performance. The IR modal share in India freight business has steadily decreased to approximately 27% from upward of 80% at the time of independence. The objective of this series is to examine how the freight business of IR can be improved. The movement of cargo by the IR is artificially divided into goods and parcels. The division is not semantic but indicates a pra- paradigmatic difference in the approach with respect to traffic rules, handling, moving, and monitoring. Shippers, however, are not interested in these differences, as their concern is mainly about the safe movement of their cargo from the point A to B at the least cost, as fast as possible. The time has come for the IR to set such an artificial divide so that cargo can be divided based on its characteristics as bulk and non-bulk or value added. While the division are not watertight, but bulk cargo would essentially refer to large volume of cargo. Full train loads are amenable for into the full train loads, which can be easily handled mechanically, and non-bulk cargo would be smaller in volume and less amenable for mechanical handling. The lessening share. The 11 commodities in IR's transport basket account for 90% of tonnage and revenue, of which coal is around 45% and iron ore and cement are around 10% each. Although these three still account for two-thirds of the IR's total freight volume, the share of the IR in their transport has reduced over the years. For example, coal consumption was 602 and 978 million tons in 2011 and 2020 respectively, with the rail transport share was 420 and 587 metric ton respectively. The rail share fell from around to 70% to 60% in a 10-year period, though it improved to 64% in 2023. It is still lower than what it was in 2011. Similarly, the share of exempt container moving in and out of ports hovered between 10% and 18% since its introduction in 2009-10, with a 2021 and 22 figure being 13%. It should be noted that private container train operation policy initiated in 2006 to boost the rail share of the container movement has not made any significant dent in improving the share. Further, adding to the woes of the IR is constantly fluctuating by key index of the net ton kilometer (NTKM), which fell for two successive years in 2015-16 and 2016-17 by 4% and 5% over the preceding years. First time such a fall has happened for two consecutive years. Demonetization perhaps has some effect in the fall of NTKM, recovered in 2017-18 by 11%, registering an increase of 1.6% in the three-year period starting 2015-18. However, NTKM continued to fluctuate as it fell again in 2019-18 and 2019-20 by 4% in the seven-year period ending 2021-2022, NTKM grew annually at a rate of 3.5%, much less than the road transport growth rate. The next जो है what has caused the recent thaw in US and Venezuela ties. Maria Corina Machado has won a huge victory in the October 2022 Venezuelan opposition primary. The Biden administration just days earlier had agreed to ease years-long brutal sanctions against the country's oil, gas, and mining industries in exchange for the President Nicolas Maduro conducting free and fair election in Venezuela in 2024. Why now? Part of the explanation for the re-engagement between Washington and Caracas lies in the challenges presented by the shift in geopolitical realities consequent to the ongoing war between the Russia and Ukraine, which within weeks of the February 2022 invasion, the Biden administration dispatched top officials to negotiate with Caracas, the country with the world's largest reserves, so as to smooth the effect of the energy crisis issuing from the conflict. Another dimension to the re-engagement where the apprehension over the potential regional security implications of Moscow's backing of its Latin America allies in the event of a deepening conflict between the two superpowers. Caracas has more or less weathered the consequences of the US-EU sanctions on its energy sector thanks to crucial support from Cuba, China, Russia, and Iran. For President Muradu, the revival of the ties with Washington could mean the beginning of the end to his government's disastrous international isolation that followed the Trump administration's severance of the diplomatic relation with the country from its position as Latin America's fourth largest economy when Mr. Muradu took office in 2013. Venezuela has slumped within years to becoming one of the region's poorest. The sanctions relief will enable Venezuela's state-owned oil farm to resume oil production and potentially restore the country's access to the US financial market. What is the road ahead? The Venezuelan opposition has received strong poll ratings since the victory in the 2022 regional polls in the Barinas Barinas state and the homeland of the former president and Mr. Murado mentor Hugo Chavez, but it is highly fragmented as evidenced, evidenced by the eight candidates who ran in the recent primary, even as it continues to encounter formidable resistance from the Morodo government. President Morodo has himself remained unfazed by international outrage against his autocratic ways. The crippling socio-economic crisis at home has forced a mass exodus of over 7 million people across the region, with the International Criminal Court (ICC) investigating Venezuela for crimes against the humanity in the wake up of humanitarian crisis that followed. One United Nations report documented a high number of extrajudicial killings by the Maduro regime. Moreover, it is by no means certain that Miss Machado from the Venezuela party would be allowed to take on President Maduro in the next year's contest, despite the overwhelming backing she received in the primary. The former legislator was disqualified in June from holding public office for 15 years on the allegation of the corruption and support for American sanctions. Ms. Machado is counting on hopes that her massive victory in the recent opposition primary will hold sway over the electorate and force the government to reverse the decision, but her hardline stance, such as the demand for President Maduro to be tried for war crimes, support economic sanctions on the government, and advocacy for foreign military intervention against the Maduro regime may harm rather than help her cause. It would therefore be premature at this stage to presume that President Maduro, who has been in office since 2013, would want to risk a competitive context in next year. The Biden administration has accordingly signaled that the quantum of the sanctions relief would depend on the distance the government can cover toward the democratic progress. Arresting Venezuela's downward spiral ought to remain uppermost on the opposition priorities. Then next PM discusses security situations in West Asia with Egypt President. Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi during the weekend to discuss the security and humanitarian situation in the West Asia amid the Israel-Hamas conflict. The discussion indicated fast-moving international exchanges among the key stakeholders as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asserted that Israel would fight a long and a difficult war against Hamas in Gaza. Yesterday spoke with President at the Al-Sisi official Abdel Fattah al-Sisi exchanged views on the deteriorating security and humanitarian situation in the West Asia. We share concern regarding the terrorism, violence, and loss of civilians' lives. We agree on the need for early restoration of a place of peace, stand stability, and facilitating humanitarian assistance. Mr. Modi said in a statement. Implication of a conflict in a separate statement is issued on Sunday, though External Affairs Ministry said the two leaders discussed the ongoing conflict and its implication for the region and the world. The discussion also indicates the importance that India attached to the role of Egypt in ensuring humanitarian assistance to Gaza Strip. For most of the Israel military action is focusing right now on October 22. India sent humanitarian relief meant for Gaza to Egypt all Aris airbase. However, Palestinian ambassador to India Adnan Abu al Haija had told the Hindu that much of the relief material that various countries have been standing for Gaza remained stuck inside the Egypt because of the intense military activity by Israel as well as due to the shortage of the fuel for the truck inside Gaza. India abstained at the United Nations General Assembly on Friday during a resolution calling for ceasefire in the fighting. The action drew criticism on the several fronts, including from the opposition Congress, which said that abstaining on such a move was inconsistent with the India's commitment to non-violence and conflict resolution. Then government preparing to release Vision India 2047 document. The government is in the midst of the finalizing a national vision plan to make India a developed nation by 2047 and ensure that the country does not slip into a middle income trap that several countries have fallen into. A similar stage of the development. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is expected to unveil the plan within the next 3 months, which includes an outline of the reform and outcomes to be achieved by 2030, along with the structural changes in governance that will be critical to make India a 30 trillion economy by 2047 with a per capita income of 18,000 to $20,000. The Niti Aayog is giving finishing touch to the plan called Vision India 2047 that has been in the works for almost 2 years and was presented to Cabinet Secretary Rajiv Gauba last Monday. In November. Parleys will be held with thought leaders and corporate heads such as Tim Cook, Sundar Pichai, Gautam Adani, Mukesh Ambani, K.M. Birla, and Chandrasekaran and Indira Nooyi to glean their insights. Middle income trap. By December, we will have the draft vision of the plan ready, and several states are also in the process of preparing their own roadmap. Niti Aayog Chief Executive Officer BVR Subramaniam said on Sunday the national plan also seeks to address regional cleavages in the economic development and reform of the government process. The biggest thing we are all worried about is what is called the middle income trap. You can reach a 5,000 $6,000 per capita income and then will not move fast. The whole purpose of the vision is to avoid that and take the country to the next level, he said, citing the example of Argentina that has failed to live up to its promise over the years. We have got through the poverty issue. We have resolved the problems of the last century, which are roads, electricity, and water. And in a couple of years, these challenges won't remain. Now we have to get to the next level. Our momentum will take you through the next 3 to 4 years. Then you will start hitting this middle income trap. The CEO of the government think tank explained. How do you address the regional disparity as you see growth in India happening in some parts with the east and north getting left behind? The west and south pursuing ahead? It is not good for the country, he averred. While India's share of the global GDP has tripled from 1.1% in 1991 to 3.5% in 2023, and it has become the world's fifth largest economy and none of the world's largest bank, contractors, legal consultancy or accountancy firm are from India. Mr. Subramaniam pointed out the whole thing is there should be Indian firms dominating parts of the landscape. We are the world's largest IT sector in the terms of exports, but we are the biggest software developers. She asked it rhetorically, noting that the plan also explores which sector and companies can be pursued to become global champions. Developing the skill sets that India's young population need to meet global needs is another priority. There is a huge demand for our nurses in the world, but half of our colleges are not even accepted on the other side. So some states are sending nurses in huge numbers while some are not, Mr. Subramaniam noted. Then Canada, India ripped is painful for the common friend Australia and boy. The rift between Canada and India is painful for the Australia that has good ties with both, but it will not affect bilateral ties. Australian High Commissioner to the Indian Philip Green has said in an interview to the Hindu. He said the conversation between India and Australian official over the issue would stay between the diplomats. Mr. Green, who took over as Australia's ambassador in August, confirmed that Prime Minister Antonio Anthony Albanese, who traveled into India twice this year, was looking forward to return to New Delhi next year for a Quad summit due to be held around January 26. He, however, did not confirm that the date for the summit, saying it was for India to announce. Canada is an old friend of Australia, and India is a dear friend and a country of considerable importance to us, the High Commissioner said, likening the India-Canada tussle sparked by the killing of the Palestinian separatist Niger Sareh in Canada and the explosion of the diplomatic dilemma between the personal friends. It is painful and it is difficult to hope, and we trust that some new foothold can be made in the bilateral relationship, and then they can work through these difficulties as soon as possible. He added last week Australia had issued a statement of deep concern that had been conveyed at the senior levels in India after the government demanded the exclusion of two-thirds of the Canadian High Commission staffs in New Delhi, and 41 Canadian diplomats left the country under the threat of having their diplomatic immunity revoked. These conversations are sensitive, and I do not purpose to go into them. What transpires between diplomats is a matter that will stay between diplomats, he said, while Australia is a Five Eyes alliance pattern if of Canada, along with US, UK, and New Zealand that share real-time regular intelligence. It is also working with India in the Quad partnership for the Indo-Pacific with US, Japan. It is India's turn to host the Quad summit next year, and sources have confirmed that the Modi government had earlier hoped to have all Quad leaders as guests or Republic Day in 2024. However, as Australian National Day also falls on January 26th, the Mr. Albanese is unable to travel to India for the summit before January 27. That the Japanese Parliament will be in its budget session on January 26, but Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida can travel for the next day as well. In it is learnt U.S. Ambassador to India Eric Garcetti had confirmed in September that Prime Minister Narendra Modi had personally invited US President Joseph Biden to be the chief guest on the Republic Day, and US confirmation is awaited after a after which the date for the Quad summit would be sealed. A response from the US may arrive in the next few weeks at the India-US 2+2 meetings where External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and Defense Minister Rajnath Singh are expected to host US Secretary of the State Antonio Blinken and US Defense Secretary General Lloyd Austin in Delhi for the talks in the first half of November. It is entirely up to the government in India and in particular, Mr. Modi to announce the date of the Quad summit. Mr. Albanese was here for the G20 summit and he is looking forward to the Quad summit. He is very much looking forward to coming back to India. The Australian High Commissioner said about the scheduling when asked if the India-Australia Comprehensive Economic Commercial Agreement, Free Trade Agreement would be ready for signing by the Mr. Albanese visit. Mr. Green said that would be his preference, but he could not put any deadline to it. And Australian negotiator had completed an early harvest economic cooperation and trade agreement (ECTA) that came into force in December 2022 and have held 7 rounds of talk on the comprehensive FTA, praising ECTA and citing a 75% trade utilization figure for the agreement. Mr. Green said that one of the issue holding of the CECA is on gaining access to Indian market for Australian agriculture and dairy products. The next is the developed countries to overshoot carbon emission goals. Developed countries responsible for three-fourths of existing carbon emissions will end up emitting 38% more carbon in 2030 than they have committed to going by the current trajectory, shows a study published by last week by the Delhi-based think tank Council for Energy, Environment and Water CEEW. The study, which comes ahead of the 28th Conference of Parties (COP28) of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change to be held in Dubai in November and December, shows that 83% of this overshoot will be caused by the US, Russia, and the European Union. At COP28, countries are expected to give an account of their nationality determined contribution, which are their commitments to the United Nations on emission cuts. The CEEW study noted that the NDCs of the developed countries already fall short of the global average reduction of the emission to the 43% below 2019 levels that is needed to keep temperature from rising above 1.5 degrees Celsius. Instead, developed countries collective NDCs only amount to 36% cut for fighting chance at the keeping warming below critical tipping points. Decades of negotiations have obliged the developed countries to lead global efforts to reduce greenhouse gases emission with legally binding targets. Collectively, developed countries were to reduce emissions by 5% from their 1990s level between 2008 and 2012 and by 18% during the 2013 and 2020. Several countries have committed to achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Doing so would require steady measurable cuts every decade until that year. As an intermediate objectives, countries presented data to the United Nations on their projected cuts until 2030 to keep temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Developed countries need to cut the emission to 43% below their 2019 level. However, CWEW study found that based on their current emissions trajectory, their cuts would likely amount to only 11% by the 2030, except for two countries, Belarus and Norway. None of the developed countries seem to be on the path to meet their 2030 targets. Through Japan and Kazakhstan are close and are expected to miss their targets by only a single percentage point. United Nations Chief Gutteres meet Nepal Prime Minister Prachanda. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Sunday called the Nepal Prime Minister Pushpa Kamal Dahal Prachanda after arriving here on first official visit to Himalayan nations. Mr. Guterres also separated meetings with the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defence Purna Bahadur Khadka and Foreign Minister Narayan Prakash Sood. In a post on X, Nepal's Prime Minister office said a meeting was held between Prachanda and Mr. Guterres, who is here on an official visit to Nepal. At the friendly invitation of the Prime Minister, Mr. Gutteres said that the transitional justice process in Nepal that the government is trying to conclude must help bring peace to victims, families, and communities. Addressing the media after meeting Prime Minister Prachanda, the United Nations chief pledged the world body support to Nepal to develop a process that meets international standards, the Supreme Court ruling, and the needs of victims, and to put it into practice. My Republica newspaper reported vulnerable country in a joint press briefing with Prime Minister Prachanda, the United Nations chief urged developed countries to increase support to countries like Nepal that are hard hit by the impacts of climate change. Nepal is also caught in a blizzard of global crisis, not of its making. The aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, inflation, and the enormous threat posed by the climate chaos. He said that much more international action is needed. The developed countries must step up to the support of sustainable development and help developing economies, including Nepal, to tackle the climate crisis. He said Mr. Guterres arrived here in the wee hours of the Sunday on a 4-day official visit. The United Nations chief is accompanied by the Under Secretary General for Peace Operations Jean Parry Lacroix, resident coordinator of the United Nations to Nepal, Hannah Singer Hamdi to the two other officials. Then next इसका लास्ट जो आर्टिकल है द ग्रेविटेशनल कांस्टेंट. Any mass wraps the fabric of space-time around itself. The more the mass, the more the warping, the force that an object feels when traveling along this wrapped path is called gravity. It tends to move the object towards the mass. The strength of this force depends on the gravitational constant denoted by G. It is a fundamental physical constant. It was first accurately determined by Henry Cavendish in 1797. G is an essential component of the both Isaac Newton's law of universal gravitational and Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity. In Newton's theory, the gravitational force between two objects is directly proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. G is proportionality constant in Einstein's theory of general relativity. G appears in the equation that describe the curvature of a wrapping of a space-time in the presence of a mass and energy. This theory provides a more accurate description of a gravitational, particularly in extreme conditions such as near massive celestial body. The precise value of G is crucial to understanding the celestial mechanics and to determine the mass of celestial bodies. Yet its value has been determined only with an uncertainty of about 42 parts per million. Its precise determination remains a topic of ongoing research in the field of experimental physics. So friends, this is all for today, and we will meet from tomorrow onwards with new news articles from the Hindu newspaper. So till then, thank you all. Thanks a lot.